Hello, I'm Dr. Chandler. Welcome to my course video lecture notes. Please print the notes provided with the video and create your own notes to get the most out of this lecture. This lecture reviews trait theory, also known as the dispositional theory of personality. What is personality? According to your text, personality is the unique core set of characteristics that influence the way you think, act, and feel. Personality characteristics are relatively consistent and stable across situations throughout the lifespan. As discussed earlier, the discipline of psychology includes many theories of personality. Each theory attempts to explain why we are the way we are or how we are. There are many theories of personality because each theory focuses on and explains different aspects of personality. To date, we've reviewed biological theory, social cognitive theories, behaviorism or learning theories, and humanistic theories. Psychoanalytic theories are summarized in another video lecture. There are several versions of trait or dispositional theory that we will study. We start with Gordon Allport's trait model that concludes that human behavior can be categorized and organized by labeling and classifying observable personality characteristics. This goes back to the ancient Greeks. Allport's trait model is supported by empirical evidence of survey questionnaires. Over 4,000 traits have been explored in this fashion, with a handful of core personality traits discovered. These core traits are labeled the Big Five. This is the diagram that you will be asked to complete for the trait theory. The letters stand for ocean, O-C-E-A-N. More specifically, the letters stand for openness to experience, C, conscientiousness, organized, E, extroversion, sociable, A, agreeable, soft-hearted, N, neurotic, emotional instability. And you can see how each one of these lines is a continuum with its opposite or opposing pole adjective on each side of the continuum. Looking a little more carefully at these, you can see that each of the Big Five, O, C, E, A, N, has a very specific definition for it that you'll be expected to know. Trait theorists focus on overt behavior rather than on unconscious feelings and beliefs. Trait theorists assume that people are able to report accurately on their own personalities using self-report inventories. For this reason, trait theorists and social cognitive personality theorists are more likely to use overt self-report questionnaires as measures of personality. Evidence of reliability and validity are strong. For example, self-reports and reports by friends and observers tend to agree for questionnaire measures of the Big Five traits. However, self-report inventories are problematic for aspects of personality that may not be available to consciousness, or for traits that are highly desirable or undesirable, as we are likely to sugarcoat our responses. Traits are often measured in continuums, as we've seen, as well as depicted in hierarchies. Here we have a hierarchy showing the super trait, and you could say this one is extroversion. And within that would be sensation seeking, and then responses within sensation seeking trait would be active or lively, and even more specific responses for each one of these traits and habitual responses might be things like preferring stimulating environments. Showing extroversion on one pole and introversion on the other. And if you're somewhere in the middle, you're an ambivert. You're neither extroverted or introverted. Terms of this theory include several kinds of traits. Again, a trait is a specific pattern of behavior or conscious motive of behavior. We have cardinal traits that dominate an individual, where a person becomes known specifically for this trait. Central traits are general characteristics that form foundations of personality, such as being open to new things. A secondary trait is related to attitudes or preferences and appears in certain situations, such as being anxious with public speaking. Factor analysis is a statistical procedure of data reduction to identify a small number of clusters that explain most of the variance that is observed in a much larger number of variables. You can see how in this table a comparison of those who prefer art score lower in explicit cognitive ability, but also score higher in affective or emotional engagement. These are being differentiated from those who prefer sciences, scoring low in affective engagement and high in explicit cognitive ability, opposite patterns of clusters of personality items. We see this more clearly in this diagram showing 3 traits in a cluster: fluency, originality, and flexibility that are said to load on the one trait of creativity. We will do an exercise in class to help you to understand the procedure of factor analysis. Here is a diagram showing clusters of many traits that add up to the big 5 traits. You will be provided with a short version of an introversion and extroversion inventory as well to see how these traits and super traits can be identified in yourself. Here's an example of a parallelogram that you'll be doing in class, but you can see here how different traits can be statistically connected and made into clusters, but I'll be walking you through this in class. Objective techniques are tests that have predetermined answers. One of the more commonly used objective techniques or standardized tests is the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, with over 500 true-false items that generate scores to profile a test taker on dimensions such as depression, hysteria, paranoia, and schizophrenia. This inventory also has a lie scale, and it is used more than any other personality test, although it is more for diagnosis of psych disorders than it is actually used to determine personality. Some of the specific characteristics that the MMPI can measure will include hypochondriasis and depression, hysteria. Some of these are psych disorders that we studied earlier. Psychopathic deviant means antisocial personality. It gives you a score on your masculinity or your femininity, on your paranoia, on psychasthenia, which means again how anxious you might be, schizophrenia, being out of touch with reality, hypomania, as well as social introversion. So you would get a score for many different kinds of psych disorders with the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. Hans-Eysenck's variation of the trait model is based on genetic heritability. This trait theory is similar to Alport's theory measuring introversion and extroversion and neuroticism and emotional stability, but also adds psychoticism for a 3-dimensional model. And here we see a graph comparing Alport's model with Eysenck's model. You can see how each of the traits align based on self-report survey measurements. This schematic diagram summarizes the 2 trait theories reviewed in this video lecture so far. Alport's term proprium is his word for ego or self-concept. The self in trait is a unifying core of personality. Terms specific to Allport's model are his three kinds of personality traits: cardinal, central, and secondary traits, as discussed earlier. Eysenck's model has basic dimensions based on genetic predispositions that underlie all other traits. These dimensions are the introversion, extroversion, and the neurotic versus emotional stability continuum that align perfectly with Albert's model, and the third dimension extending out from this model of psychoticism that does not align with Alport's trait model. Remember that trait theory identifies characteristic patterns of behaviors assessed by self-report inventories and peer reports. Another version of this theory is William Sheldon's theory of somatotypes, or body types. This theory associates different body physiques with personality types. Ectomorphs are tall and slender and overrepresented in populations with neurotic disorders. Mesomorphs are muscular and tend to be overrepresented in criminal populations, while ectomorphs are expected to be happy and jolly. If you look around you, you will note that very few of us could be easily put into any one of these categories. A positive of trait theories are that they have a great deal of empirical evidence using the inventories and statistical analysis. A negative of trait or dispositional theory of personality is that while they may correctly identify personality traits and dispositions, even indicating neurotic or psychotic traits, they do not suggest treatments or therapy for those suffering from any disorder. Here is the diagram once again that you will be asked to complete with labels and the general description of trait theory. The general description might be: human behavior can be organized by labeling and classifying observable personality characteristics. Notice I did not use the term trait or disposition in the definition of the theory. You don't have to write the opposite words, but you will have to write open for O, conscientious for C, extroversion for E, and agreeable for A, and neurotic for N.